Well, welcome to the Flow Sales Podcast, everybody. We are excited to have David Gordon with us in the studio here. I'll let you give a brief bio.
Okay.
And after that, we're going to get into a really interesting topic, rep of the future, which you've had a lot of involvement with. So we'll let you...
Okay. My name is David Gordon, principal of Channel Marketing Group. We are a strategic planning and marketing consultancy firm based here in Raleigh. If you want to learn more, it's channelmkt.com. We focus in strategy, marketing, channel marketing, and market research for manufacturers, distributors, and reps in the construction and industrial trades. So that'll give you a little sense. And we've run a couple of blogs in the industry, electricaltrends.com and hvacrtrends.com.
Let's talk about rep of the future.
Where'd it come from? How did all these discussions start?
NEMRA, which is, the National Electrical Manufacturer Rep Association, for probably the last 15 years or so, has done a Rep of the Future study every 5 years. And we got involved 2019 in doing research for them on the current Rep of the Future report, which was released just before COVID, actually February 2020. And we spoke and surveyed about 700 people in the electrical channel, distributors, manufacturers, and reps, and asking them, when they start looking at the market and where they see their needs being forward, they meaning distributors and the manufacturer, what do they need from reps? Because NEMRA wanted to provide a tool, a roadmap for its members to grow their business. And it became a tool for manufacturers to evaluate their rep firms. And with talking to distributors, it gives a sense of where it goes. So we did all that research. We shared the results with the membership, with the manufacturers. It's been an interesting journey over the last 5 years, seeing members adopt it. Because as you know, with everything else, there's the early adopters. There are people who are already along that path without realizing they were on that path. The forward thinkers. You had others who've seen it and have adopted. And then there are some who have been pulled along by their manufacturers, because manufacturers have said, all right, we maybe mentally always evaluated our reps. And no one ever wants to say that they really use the Jack Welch method of employee management, of ABCs, but manufacturers do ABC. So this gave them a more formal scorecard of how to look at their reps. So they've adopted that and pulled it in. And then there are some agencies, they haven't really changed in the last 30 years. And that can work for them, for that ownership based upon their goals. So that's kind of what the history of it has been. And NEMRA has invested in this on behalf of their members for the last 15 years, every 5 years. It has also been used up in Canada because NEMRA, which is a Canadian electrical manufacturer rep, is heavily tied to NEMRA. So those members have gotten benefit from it too. There are some people in ERA who are also NEMRA members, so they have seen the benefit of it. So that has helped, and we're getting ready to do the next version of that right now.
So every 5 years you do a refresh.
Yes.
Things have changed a lot in the last 5 years. Clear.
Yeah, because it's not only on the rep side that it's changed. Think of all the changes that have happened on the manufacturer side and then on the distributor side, let alone, we can say what we want from the government policy and whatnot, but COVID created lots of change. And even if we take it out of COVID, the market just changes significantly when you start looking at 5-year segments. Who would have thought of AI 5 years ago? Who would have thought of how much investment's going into data centers? Who would have thought electrification? Forget about green and things like that, but just the whole electrification, what's going on with the grid. Who would have thought that has really been brought to the forefront now 5 years ago? Industrial reshoring. How much is that changing the economy? So all these dynamics, you have to start thinking, how is that affecting the customer? How does that roll up to the distributor? How does that affect the manufacturer? And from a rep viewpoint, the rep's customer is the manufacturer, because that's where the check is coming from, right? Yeah. So if you're understanding all these things as a rep, then you can start thinking, where do you want to go? Because you start understanding the customer's expectations. And that's the key to success, is understanding customer expectations. And then how do you manage it?
So you've done this for the past 3 iterations? Or
No, we did the last one. We did
The last one.
we did the research in 19 and released it in 2020.
what was most surprising that you found in the research?
It's tough to say what was the most surprising 5 years after the fact, okay? Because one of the things that was talked a lot prior and was seeping more into the conversation was topics about succession planning, which we've seen really explode into the marketplace in the last 2-3 years with acquisitions, mergers within the rep community. And it's interesting, if we look at the succession planning and consolidation with the rep side of the business as well as the distributor, the biggest driver of that is people are getting old. The ownership gets old. And if they don't have a kid in their business, they either need to do an ESOP, sell it to management, or have an exit. So that's what's driving a lot of that. You're seeing more of that. So we knew planning would become important. But what probably become more mainstream instead of, let's say, as an aha, is few manufacturers had talked at that time about reaching the end customer. They were more comfortable for the most part with reps calling on the distributor. More of them started expressing that they wanted the reps spending more time at their customers, at the distributor's customers, whether that be a contractor, whether that be a industrial end user, whether that be at an influencer, an engineer, an architect, specification type people, focusing on brand preference versus focusing on servicing the distributor. So that dynamic has really accelerated. That further, and this probably, if you want to think about major change, that then tied into another topic of demand generation, because calling on that audience, a portion of that's demand generation, but it's marketing. Manufacturers wanted to see reps investing more in marketing to be a force multiplier. And one of the things I've seen within agencies over the last 2-3 years, there are many more marketing people that have been employed within the rep community by factors of 2 and 3, if not more, of people who are responsible for marketing, not the principal doing it in a part-time basis. That's been, I know one, they're not necessarily a large agent. They've got 3-4 people in marketing. And they can actually track that back to revenue that they've generated because it becomes that force multiplier to get the messaging out. And for many who've said an independent sales agent, the term is a misnomer because most agents, regardless of the industry, are not selling anything. Selling defined as giving the final price and collecting the cash, closing the sale. They're really going out creating brand preference, which is really a marketing function. It's a demand generation function. And the reason they're called sales is because years ago, no one was willing to figure out a way to compensate them. So they had to be compensated based upon sales in that territory, sales into an account within a defined area that manufacturer gave them. Could be national, could be local. Mm-hmm. But it was tied to the selling of the product versus the activities that drove interest. Because there's plenty of reps who don't get compensated. They've created the demand, but that product might be purchased outside the channel that they're responsible for. Or it could be purchased by that company, but the purchasing manager happens to be in a whole nother state. But that demand generation and the marketing were some things that really came out of the last one. And really, probably to put it in a frame for you, there were 5 pillars that really came out of the Rep of the Future that drove more detailed information and guidance we gave people. And the pillars were product expertise. Manufacturers expect the rep to know the product. Should fair enough accept. But with the changing of people, that means you have to put a lot more into training. Demand generation, planning, because there's not only planning for the agency, but planning with that factory to drive growth, and planning for the agency itself of where it wants to go. There's a succession planning, there's actual business planning, there's annual sales plans, there's annual marketing plans. What's your technology investment strategy? Not for this year, but looking out, what are you going to need? Getting people to think more forward of their business and more collaboratively with their customers and with the factory. The fourth, as I mentioned, was marketing. And it's not just how do we go and buy what I'll call trash and trinkets, the pens and golf balls and stuff like that. It's more than how do we have a count a day or go and have an event or T&E and take someone to golf. It's how do we mine data and actually do marketing and vertical marketing. And you represent 28 manufacturers, but you also know there's synergies amongst some of those manufacturers. And how do you focus on specific applications that tie in multiple manufacturers? Thinking like that versus, forgive me for saying it this way, go fetch. Yeah. For a particular product, particular factory. Kind of that's old school. And the fifth pillar was technology, which plays into flow, but it also plays into CRM systems, marketing automation systems, warehouse management systems, expense management systems, marketplace data and data intelligence. Within different industries, there are software tools for getting project information and bid information. It's thinking holistically about the technology stack that the organization needs. And it's not running Microsoft 95. And it's not running all of the commissions based upon Excel or the back of the napkin. It's how do we get into the modern age. So those became the 5 pillars from the last platform.
When's the next iteration?
We're currently doing a project for NEMRA called Manufacture of the Future. So we're trying to capture information from manufacturers of where they see their business challenges over the next 3 to 5 years. We're taking that information. We're now going to roll it into the next Rep of the Future, which we're going to be doing that research this summer, early fall. And the next document will be rolled out at NEMRA 2025 in February.
Do you have any feelers on, you think some of this is going to change from last time, or like what's happening in the market now? Because the Rep of the Future you did is now about 5 years old. What do you think we're going to see?
You're going to see, from early feedback that we've gotten from the Manufacturer of the Future, you're going to see a double and tripling down on the demand generation side and the marketing side. And that's driven because of consolidation of the distributors. And with the latest in the electrical industry between AD and IMARC merging, now there's fewer independents and fewer abilities for reps to affect change individually. So it's going to come down to how do you get information down to the end customer, the influencer, to affect behavioral change, to get the product spec, to even create demand. Because a lot of times responding to us respect, that's servicing an opportunity versus creating an opportunity. It can be two different things. Some factories don't have the ability to create because they don't have products that could be necessarily productivity enhancements. They need monies to be allocated, and therefore you're servicing. Sometimes you can create demand in white space, but they want them focusing more and more on that. The part that will be the challenge is manufacturers have to think about how their compensation models have to evolve. Because most manufacturer compensation models were built 30, 40, 50 years ago, strictly based upon percent of sale. But manufacturers over the years have moved more and more functional responsibilities to the agents, whether it's back-end services side or sales responsibilities or marketing. They want more. Agency expenses go up, talent goes up, desired skill sets go up, the tools. Agents need to have a vehicle that if they're going after specifications, but that sale's not happening in their territory, how are they going to get compensated? If they're going to invest into technology, they're going to invest in AI, you either need to be an agency of a size that can afford to do it, or you're going to need some help. If you're going to add people to focus on selected vertical markets or selected product types or bring in engineering resources, how are you going to monetize that? So those are things that are going to come into the next Rep of the Future.
Yeah, we've seen it in some of the, like for Cisco, for instance, if you're a Cisco provider or a partner for them and you get to a certain size, a lot of times they'll get creative and do things where they'll help fund a resource on staff for the partner or the rep in this case to just focus on their product or be an expert on a group of products. And, we're starting to see some of our manufacturers in the utility space start kicking around those ideas as well, just because we got to own that end customer. And that's, to me, and that's important for our business. And we're doing things from an NTS perspective. We're cutting territories down so we can get in there and really grind out those end user contacts and opportunities and demand, drive that demand. So to me, we're going to have to come up with some creative ways to get those resources closer to that end user versus having them all at the factory. We got to be able to get them out in the field. Besides just doing a field trip with a factory engineer, we got to be able to do that on a weekly basis. So they're going to rely on us to do it. So we got to come up with ways that we all win.
When you think about a rep today, the reality is a rep's a fractional salesperson for the factory as an agency. But you only have X people who can only spend X amount of hours in any given week for a particular factory, let alone within it. What we're going to get to is how do some of your people or new people be fractionalized for selected groups of manufacturers. So you take your Cisco example, they're not going to spend, for argument's sake, a fully loaded person $150,000, just randomly picking a number within a element of your geographic market, because one person realistically covering all 8 states makes no sense. It's like throwing a pebble into the pool. But then the question becomes, how do you have 3 or 4 of those people, depending upon the role, it could be even billable hours to an end customer, depending upon the service, but how do you get 3 or 4 of those manufacturers to help share that resource? And you also pick up a piece of it, because another definition of profit is reduction of loss. You're not saying you're not willing to help fund that, but for you to go and invest $150,000 on the hope that the person can generate strictly for that factory, knowing the sales cycle, is a significant investment. And if a factory, and someone like a Cisco with their size and their revenue base, if they're not willing to invest, how important is the initiative to them? Because when it's all on the back end, they want all the reward and none of the risk. So why should all the risk be on the rep? You're willing to share the risk.
That's right.
But it's a different thought process for a lot of these factories, because with so many of them being owned by being publicly held companies, now it comes down to the quarter. And what type of turnover happens in some of these companies at regional management and higher level, let alone how often do they change their initiative du jour?
That's a revolving door. You get a new regime in, all right, here's a new plan. You get a new regime in, all right, here's a new plan. So no, you're 100%.
Right. So why should you take all that risk?
Yeah.
It needs to be a risk sharing. We've known some manufacturers who, when they have those type of things, they may come up with some retainer models. They'll come up with some compensation sharing models. Some who are risk averse will come up with incremental commission models for those opportunities, or they'll do a steps to sale compensation model. So there's other ways that it can be done, but to think that just because they want you to do it, you should write that check and say, thank you very much for giving me that incremental expense. I hope to get the return for you. It's a lot for them to ask.
Is there anything that the reps can do to kind of help facilitate those conversations? Are the manufacturers, I guess, realizing that they need to do this, or is this something the rep should go to the manufacturer and say, hey, like, we got to do marketing, we got to do this, let's come up with a new revenue model? What do you recommend?
It's a loaded question. And the reason I say it's a loaded question is I know reps who've attempted to have that conversation one-on-one with a factory, and unless it's an enlightened factory, the factory says no, because factories believe in divide and conquer. And divide and conquer means you can't come with 3 or 4 or 5 of them or reps at an advisory council, because one guy says it and what's the factory say? Let's take that offline.
Yeah.
But reps need it to a degree, and I'm not saying every rep this is the right strategy for, but ones who are like-minded with the same factory, it wouldn't hurt them to speak with a similar voice. They could each have different tactical strategies for their marketplace, but at a higher level, there's a opportunity. And you also obviously have to think of the right factories. Most reps, they'll push the envelope to a degree, but they're saying, well, so-and-so is writing the check, so I don't want to push it too much because I don't want to be afraid. I'm afraid of losing the line. There's a fine balance. It comes down to how well you know the players, how you can socialize the information through multiple levels within the factory, because most regional managers will not be too creative and don't want to take a risk to bring that information up because they don't want to take it to the VP or the president. They're used to idea generation flowing downhill. You're smiling. He's kind of like, I resemble that, but I'm not going to talk about any of my manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, when you're on a 30-day contract, sometimes you're like, then there's a way to have it. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier today is relationship. You got to have that relationship with those manufacturers where you can have these conversations. And it doesn't mean like, hey, when you bring an idea, they have to do it or you're walking out. I think it's just more of, let's have a discussion on how we can grow our business together.
Right.
And you have to get outside the old way and just, it's got to be this way. There's so many opportunities out there and the market has changed. So we got to be able to adapt with that market, which might mean having these conversations that get us all out of our normal business practices. But you got to have that relationship to have that discussion where you don't fear for repercussions.
A relationship is important, and remembering it's still a people business. It's all going to happen on email and text, and it doesn't all happen on Teams. Teams can continue relationships, but you do have to have some face-to-face. The most progressive manufacturers have rep advisory councils that they actually listen to versus just want to have an excuse to get everyone together to play golf with a checkbox to say, we had a rep advisory council. The most progressive manufacturers also recognize that the organization does not need to be run by legal, finance, IT, and operations. And what I mean by that is there's so many of them that it's got to be a one-size-fits-all strategy. Every market, every opportunity can be a little bit different. How do you come up with a cafeteria playbook that works for that different market? Still can fit within a parameter, but you can't always put a circle into a square. How do you come up with the right solution? Because at the end of the day, every factory is interested in one thing, actually two things. They're interested in increased sales and increased profit. And what's every rep interested in? Increased commissions from that factory. You're not thinking about improved profitability from that factory because there's so much other things that go into that. But you need to get more money and you got to be able to monetize. It does have to be a profitable line to work with, but that gets into ease of doing business on the back end. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the dynamics that get played into it.
It's a lot of complexity, right? A lot of stuff coming. And then we'll do like one more topic, and then we'll close it out. You mentioned marketing, and like you said, that's something that maybe a lot of rep firms maybe aren't doing yet. Something they haven't gotten into. What have you seen as successful ways to do that from rep firms that are hiring marketers? Like, because the rep model is interesting from a marketing standpoint, right? How have you seen that done well?
Well, challenging question to answer because it's so many different industries. What inevitably the first question really comes down to is value proposition and answering that question. So what is the value proposition of the rep? What is the value proposition of the lines that the rep represents? What is the value proposition of those products? The answers to those three questions in a tiered approach start driving in a lot of strategy and tactics that fit into it. Branding fits into it. So when you think branding, yeah, it can be advertising, it can be social media, it can be e-marketing, it can be website, it can be being at the right events. When you get into some more of the tactical, you get more into application marketing, where we talk about, all right, and this is where it changes by industry. I'll pick on in lighting. Let's say you're talking about energy efficiency. All right, maybe we want to talk about energy efficiency in certain states, and you're talking about utilities and takeoffs and rebates, and you're focusing on the warehouse space and certain products that fit into that. So that's where you start getting into the rabbit hole of energy efficiency starting here, and then what is the value proposition to take it all the way down to product. But people buy solutions. People don't buy products. So it's thinking about those type of things. It's segmenting of the customer base. How do you communicate to different layers of your customer base based upon their size, based upon their role? It's doing gap analysis with the data. So there's a lot of different elements you can start migrating down, but start at understanding the value proposition. And for the agency, why should someone want to work with this agency? And for a lot of agencies, that's a tough question to be introspective, because their first default is our people, and we service our customers well, and our longevity, and we care about customers. So the guy down the street who's been in business as long as you, he's got lousy service, doesn't care about the customers, has, pardon my French, shitty people who've all been there for 20 years also. There's no depth to prove it. We live in a world today where people want to, they're saying, prove it. Make it real. Tell me what projects you've worked on in the area. What types of solutions did you bring? What value did you add? And that's why I use the term value proposition, because that's what people are coming to you for. When you have that, then you evolve that into a relationship. Then you get into life cycle marketing.
That's the thing about it. And then this is coming out NEMRA 2025, right?
Yep, that'll come out then. The Manufacturer of the Future report probably come out sometime next month.
You know, where can people find that?
Well, because those are NEMRA, going to be NEMRA driven, the full report will be open to NEMRA members, manufacturers, and reps, and they can get that at nemra.org, or at least with reaching out to there. There will be highlights of that I'll share via Electrical Trends, just because we want to help NEMRA socialize that to its membership. So people can subscribe at electricaltrends.com, and that's a free subscription. Probably genericize some of it, so if anyone's involved in the HVAC segment, they can go to hvacrtrends.com or give me a call.
Fair enough. To that point, how can people contact you if they want to work with you?
They can go to channelmkt.com, which is the website. They can reach me at dgordon@channelmkt.com.
That was good.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we
Enjoyed it.